Welcome back to the SyncLodge podcast series Exploring Music. This is the second of 2 episodes titled The Devaluation of Music with Jay Mistry and Helienne Lindvall. Now, if you haven't listened to the first one, we do say it makes sense to go back and listen to the first one first. But anyway, let's rejoin the conversation.
As a music fan, I think streaming is great.
Me too.
I think that we just need to work out a better infrastructure, a better
remuneration. Basically.
Yeah,
I think you're right. That the way
details.
to do it is to have the composers, the writers, and the artists get them together with some combined voice, some combined representation, and sharing the information of what I'm getting compared to what you're getting, and having this open.
That's why I got involved in the Ivors Academy, because I got so tired of people sitting around on social media bitching about how bad the rates are and not doing anything. And I urge anyone, if you just sit around and bitch and don't do anything, then I don't want to hear it, because it doesn't lead to anything. Yeah. I think that we're at a point now where we really need to take action, and I commend everyone that has kind of come to the table trying to do something about it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's urgent. It's desperate out there. When I talk to songwriters, they've seen their income just bottom out. There's a few at the very top, but even some at the very top are looking, that's why some of them, if they've had big hits, they've sold it to companies that will just buy them up, equity firms, because they're like, because they can't see how they're going to be able to make any money in the future, so they'd rather take the money up front. Yes. When I argue for copyright and try to explain what copyright is, I say that what we make is medicine for the soul. And to get that medicine to work takes years and years. It's like, in the same way as if you're a scientist.
Yeah, you're perfecting it all the time,
and you're trying all these different combinations, and it doesn't work. So when you finally do manage to get that song that hits people in the heart or in the feet, if it's a dance track, then that's gonna pay for all the hours that you put in there. That's how copyright works.
Yeah.
And one other bugbear of mine that I want to get across here is music in schools. Yeah, of course, some people have just got it in them to write music or to produce music and to write songs and stuff, but a lot of people get that inspiration from school and like picking up an instrument from when you're 5 or 6, and it could be like a little recorder, or it could be violin lessons, piano lessons, guitar lessons, etc., etc. Even for me and my kids, I have to pay. They go to school, but I have to pay for the
music lessons.
The music lessons. That's just wrong. Yeah. It should be part of your learning.
The interesting thing with that, so I went to a music school that was a regular school that focused on music. So it was basically like a school of performing arts in Sweden called Adolf Fredrik, which is unique of its kind at the time. And our school had, in general, the highest grades in all subjects.
Yes.
Yeah. Because music, whatever nobody did a specific study of it, but I think
there has been. There has been studies on what the development of the brain when a young person actually learns a musical instrument.
Yeah.
Right? Whether they continue that or not, there has been studies that show that it's hugely effective, and it's great if you want to be a scientist, if you want to be whatever field, you want to be a doctor, whatever field you want to be in. At a certain age, learning an instrument triggers the brain. It's a capacity builder.
Yeah, and it's kind of like symbiotic as well, because if you look at my boy's really good at math, right? But then when he picked up the guitar and he looked at the fretboard and he looked at the little squares, and he just understood it.
Yeah. But it develops the brain. It does affect the way the brain develops.
But like I said, then it goes back to his math as well. So it's working in tandem.
But then I also think, and this is where, for example, Max Martin, people talk about how come Sweden is punching so high above its weight when it comes to songwriters in particular, considering, we've had about 25 years of the Max Martin, Sharon, Shellback, all these songwriters coming out of Sweden, and Carl Falk, me, but
was he one of them?
And
Jürgen Olofsson?
Jürgen Elfsen, I've worked with him. He was at BMG when we were both there.
He was pretty cool.
And who had written like some of the biggest, the Taylor Swift records, Katy Perry records.
Westlife.
The Weekend, that I Can't Feel My Face, that's Max Martin. You got Moves Like Jagger is Shellback, another Swedish writer. So you have all these writers, and I know that Max has said when people ask, and other like Swedish House Mafia said the same thing, that when they ask how come the Swedes are doing so well on this, and he said that he thanks the National Public Music scheme for children, that every child when we were growing up would get an instrument, would have the opportunity to play an instrument. If you couldn't afford to buy it yourself, then it would be provided to you. And sadly now there's, because of the way that the system has worked in free schools in Sweden, actually that all those music lessons are not as prevalent as they used to be. So we'll see what's going to happen.
Same thing in Canada. When I went to grade school in Canada, to the state-run schools, I also went to a Catholic school for a couple of years, and they didn't have this, but the state-run ones, you had to learn an instrument. The whole class at a certain time each day or 3 days a week went over to the music room, and you had chosen the instrument you were going to play, and you were learning this. And it was part of the whole thing. And you got a grade, and it was one of your grades as you went along. And some students didn't like it. It wasn't cool for them, but they still had to do it. I changed schools because of that. And I don't think it's going anymore. I think they've really cut back on that. I think it's really a thing that they've seen, but
you just never know who you're going to find, and there will be youngsters that never knew they were musical, or never knew.
I'm one of those. I mean, we had, I mean, we had, if I would look back, my grandmothers on both sides, they were musicians, but neither one of my parents. And I hadn't really thought about it. And I remember I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old in school, and somebody came in and said, does anybody want to do music? We're going to do rhythm. And they kind of like show this thing. And I'm like, I'll do that. And then...
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, sounds like fun, And then they gave me a recorder, and then they said, do you want to choose another instrument? And I'm like, recorder isn't going to...
cut it for too long.
And actually, I was in a ensemble, a Baroque ensemble of playing the recorder. I played the alto recorder, but I got so pissed off that nobody else practiced properly. So after that, I'm like, I'm going to pick an instrument that I'm not relying on other people. I picked the guitar at that point. But that was completely a fluke initially. And I know plenty of other musicians that...
You mentioned something really important there, that it was fun.
The recording.
No. That it was fun, right?
It was fun,
yes,
so
exactly.
Some kids say, like, if you're good at soccer or cricket or whatever, netball or whatever, you can't wait for that lesson because that's the lesson that you want, because it's fun, right? You want to do that. For some people, it will be music too.
Yeah.
But, as I said, you never know. You could, unless you try it, you won't know if you're good at it or not. And not having the opportunity is what I'm talking about. Of course, like, if you don't take to it, you don't take to it. But where are we going to find them? Where are we going to find these new
like
composers?
in your situation where the parents have to actually pay extra for it, and there's a lot of people that just can't afford that.
Right.
And their kids might want to do it, but
My
they
son,
can't.
I bought a guitar for him and he takes it to school.
Yeah, a lot of people can't afford that. They have kids that would like to do that, but they can't afford that. As I've already stated, my view, I don't think it's smart. If you want to have a smart generation that's capable and going into whatever profession they are, you should teach them music at an early age.
And well-rounded.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been talking about composers contributing to the music industry. How about musicians contributing to society? Not everyone, most people listen to music.
I think the majority.
Hey, think about Donald Trump is using, can I just say, I think it's the funniest thing. Whoever picks the songs for Donald Trump when he goes out, it's hilarious. You can't always get what you want. He used to use "It's the End of the World as We Know It." This is the reason I know those songs. It's not like I always watch his appearances. Yes. So you're just thinking, wow, it's, you know,
And,
I mean, apart from
the REM songs.
so they tried to take him to court. But of course, the law is if you're speaking in a public space, if they have an ASCAP or a BMI license, then you can play whatever you want. Yeah. It's only if you're using it for an ad or something like that. So that's where he did get in trouble when they were using music without asking. But you know, that's why there's so many musicians that are pissed off that he's using their music. But it only goes to show how important music is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he could, if he didn't want to piss off musicians, just not have any, or just have the Star Spangled Banner. You know,
Right.
But no, it makes him sound
You can't always get
cool.
what you want.
Yeah, that is hilarious.
Yeah.
And that was when in the run up to the election.
That's like making a joke at the people that are supporting you.
Yeah,
It's kind of
exactly.
going over their heads a bit.
But Lionel, do we really want to go down this route now?
No,
the political route? No.
No, because we'll be here all night, and I'll say things I'll have to edit most of it out anyway. Right? Yeah. But so you used the word, and you touched on it again a little later, but you used the word emergency
Yes.
or a situation. And so, and I think we've come to the point where, okay, the creators have to band together. And they have to be educated on what's going on and what actually their power is.
Yeah.
Right?
And exactly. They don't have to feel powerless. There are, I mean, not only with us, the Ivors Academy here, around Europe, every country has an organization that is representing songwriters and composers. The Ivors Academy is part of the European Composer and Songwriter Alliance, and we're addressing these things on a legislative level in the EU, but also on a more local level. And in the US, I mean, there's quite a few. You've got like Songwriters Guild of America, you've got the Nashville Songwriters Association, and you got SONA, which we collaborate with a lot. So
if there are these organizations, then why is there the problem? Don't they have the clout at the table? What is?
Because, and this is interesting in particular, well, in America, they have an even bigger problem with the consent decrees. So even though America is, you know, supposedly the center of capitalism in the world, songwriters have their hands tied when it comes to what they get paid for broadcasting for performance.
Yeah.
And this rate has not been changed. I think it's been changed once in like 100 years.
Yeah.
The reason that they have consent decree is because the argument from the radio stations and broadcasters and streaming companies is that we would have too much power if we were allowed to actually sit at the negotiating table and renegotiate these rates. So they're decided by copyright tribunal instead. So for songwriters, unlike the record companies are still able to negotiate, and they can say if the deal isn't good enough, they're not going to have their music on that particular service. But we're not allowed to say no. And in America, there's even the rule is that even if a new service pops up and they've got a deal with the labels, they can use the music even if they don't have a deal yet with the songwriters and publishers, because as long as they show willingness to sit down at the table, they can say, well, you know, because we are viewed as licensing us and not launching before having the publishing properly licensed would make it too slow for the labels to be able to release. My argument with this, and this is the most kind of simple, I'm really big on metaphors, but is in any other business, say Tesco's or supermarket, wherever you are in the world, Tesco's are not allowed to sell an egg sandwich without knowing where all the ingredients came from and who they paid for those ingredients. You have to know where the eggs, the mayo, the bread, the butter, all of that, you know, they wouldn't be able to sell it without having all that information. But somehow in the digital music industry, they can release records. A streaming company can use music without knowing who the songwriters are. So to me, I think that the fairest thing would be that a streaming company cannot have or distribute a record unless they know who the songwriters are. I've brought this up before, and what I get told is, well, it would take too long. It takes too long to get that information, so we can't get the record out in time. My point is...
But they already have that information.
Well, sometimes
the record companies do. The PROs
they used to. The PROs, they used to. I mean, we can have...
the PROs have that?
The PROs, I mean, sometimes the splits might not have been 100% agreed upon, because records come out so quickly now without the songwriters having, done their kind of negotiating. And you can imagine now when actually the top 100, I think the average last year was over 5 writers per song. And it's not like all evenly split, because a lot of these songs, in particular when you get to like 10 or 15 writers, is not 15 writers in the studio. It's samples. It's people people came in and played bass on a record and they get 2% or whatever. So the splits might not be already agreed, but there should be an ISWC, which is the identification code for the song. So as long as you have that, then we can refer back to it when the splits are agreed. But you need to have something there, at least, who wrote it. And I would argue that if a record company could not release a record, if a streaming service could not distribute a record without this information, that information would show up a lot quicker.
They'd figure it out.
They would figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
What's your view on blockchain?
It's a good vehicle.
Yeah.
But it's not a solution to the problem we have.
Yeah.
The problem is not being able to kind of have that information travel and down the road. The problem comes a lot earlier. And I think with blockchain, not to kind of get too deep into that, but the issue is that who is the arbitrator with blockchain? Like, if somebody comes in and says, I wrote this song, or I have 50% of this song, or whatever, knowing how records are created these days and how composers and songwriters in those situations don't really have their eye on the ball on it, then because of blockchain, it is set in stone, and it's who's going to then
check to make sure it's true.
Well, not only that, but if somebody argues and say, no, that is incorrect, who is the arbitrator? Do we have, in the same way as when there's been issues in cryptocurrency, to not get too kind of sidetracked, but, the problem with cryptocurrency or Bitcoin is, where do you go when there is a problem?
It was kind of like a loaded question, because I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And because, I've worked for PROs, I've worked for publishers, I've worked, in various different organizations. There's always been talk of having like a central database, and they've all failed.
Yeah.
Most of the time is exactly as I said, well, who's going to be sitting above it and leading it and making sure it's all working properly? Because even with the PROs, they're like factions now, of like with ICE and with other areas where like 2 or 3 of them get together, and that's okay, to cut down costs, etc., etc., etc. But in terms of like a global database or a database
what I would like to see is just one of them have a concise database.
Right. But that's difficult. It is difficult because
I know people at these organizations, and I've been dealing with them. And one of the things that I have a frustration with, and ASCAP and BMI, and Music Reports, and I've dealt with all of these companies, and to find a consistent database that does not have errors and omissions.
Yeah, but
Why is that?
As Helienne pointed out earlier, it's because like songs are getting done so quickly, and sometimes the splits aren't sorted out at the beginning, and they should be sorted out at the beginning.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I'm a songwriter. I've written tons of songs. I've co-written with some people, but I have 12 albums out, right? And just my own catalog. I'm a sole songwriter. I own everything. There's no publisher involved. There's no record company involved. Right? I register it with SOCAN in Canada. When it goes into the States, they've added publishers to my stuff.
Wow.
They've added a record label
Totally.
that's not associated with me at all. They've added stuff, and I have to go after them and say this is not correct.
But is there another Landr Lodge?
No.
I mean, you're not
That's
the only.
even more bizarre.
Well, actually,
I've never found another Landr Lodge, and I've looked. Right?
Wow.
Okay. So this is why I do have a unique name that way.
Yeah.
Okay. And it is something that I've been astonished by, and I've had to get in touch with these companies and download my catalog from SOCAN and send it to them and say, this is the correct information. You have to, I don't know who you've been paying, but it wasn't me. There's this publishing name on that. Who is that?
I think with that, and it's not necessarily then SOCAN's fault, it's whatever happens when it leaves SOCAN. I think that this is one of the issues. I mean, there is a lot of work being done in this field, and I'm not even that shocked from what you're saying, because I had somebody claim my publishing on a song in this country, and I'm a member of 2 separate PROs. I'm a member of STIM and of PRS, and the registrations don't match between them, even though they're both in ICE.
Right.
There are moves that they're trying to kind of fix this in the back office, because there are so many PROs and that there's no authoritative source. I think obviously I'm the authoritative source of my songs. You are the authoritative source when it comes to your songs. But the US PROs don't have your contact details, I guess.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a really quick way. I mean, I think one of the things that I would love would be to have an alert system, and I've asked for this. When somebody comes in and claims your publishing, that you get at least a ping from your PRO saying somebody's just claimed this. Is this correct?
Yeah.
And I've been told by someone that, catalogs change owners so often, we couldn't do that. And I say, you know what? It's like, I've got a bank account, and if I buy something that is over £100, I get an alert on my phone. And this is a bank that has like millions and millions of users, and they're able to automate that.
Millions and millions of outlets.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The whole system's very complex.
Yeah.
And I understand that there is, when you're dealing with all these PROs across the world, and some are better than others, some are not good at all, that it's difficult, because as soon as there are 2 conflicting registrations, then suddenly the money gets stuck, for example. And it could easily happen. I had a song last year, or the year before last, with 4 writers, 2 German members of GEMA, 1 French member of SACEM, me, member of PRS and STIM, and the separate registrations that then come from our publishers into the PROs as well. There are, all you need is somewhere along the way a percentage that is registered differently by one publisher, and you've got a conflict there. There are companies that are trying to sort this. I used to work with a company called Auddly that are trying to solve this. It's difficult because it's always about what the business models are. How, when there's some companies that benefit from lack of accuracy.
Delay.
I remember
delays.
Delays.
Unclaimed royalties.
Also because you get, usually what happens is, or always what happens is, if after a certain amount of time, if they don't have the information, it'll get distributed according to market share.
Yeah.
And we can all figure out who benefits and who doesn't from that.
And apparently that in the States is in the hundreds of millions. Apparently the unclaimed royalties is a huge amount, and they just, we'll distribute it to the main people, and they just sit on it.
And it's interesting.
My feeling is, and this is a bit of a thing that I'm very frustrated by over the last year. I've been dealing with different organizations this way, but that's their job.
Yeah.
To manage that database. That's pretty well one of their main jobs, is they're collecting the money, know who they should pay, and make sure that their information is correct and clear. And
You'd have thought, going back to, tech, like we were saying, the tech companies are like blah, 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 blah. But in this case, there are tech companies that, like banks, that work with banks that could do trillions of transactions a day, right? And get it right.
Yeah.
So, it's possible. And like if you, with 20, 30, 40, 50 songs that you've got, and that's it, how could they possibly make a mistake?
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's just you getting 100%. There's no publisher, no label, nothing.
Yeah.
How could they possibly make a mistake?
Well, at some point along the line, when it crossed the border from Canada to the States, somebody changed it.
Well, this is the thing.
It's human error, of course.
It's not always human error. It's actually somebody taking advantage of
somebody changed
because
it.
I know that there have been big writers where somebody has gone in. There are people that actually scour the registrations and see if there's, for example, if somebody doesn't have a publisher, that they then grab the publishing and just
it's a numbers game, and it's like if they get caught.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, when I wrote on Facebook about my experience when somebody, this company had claimed my publishing and then claimed that it was because one of my co-writers was with a publishing company that had been bought by this company, and by mistake they also took my publishing. I wrote it on Facebook, and there were numerous other songwriters where this had happened. For me, I was lucky. I didn't actually lose any money because I caught it by pure chance before the record was out. But another writer friend of mine had lost 19 grand because he didn't realize it until this publisher that had claimed the 19 grand was not one of these publishers that played by the rules.
So in that case, did the PRO say it's not our fault? You got to deal with the publisher.
Yeah.
Because that happens a lot as well. It's kind of like we paid the wrong. It's not like a bank, if they pay the wrong person, or if
actually with banks don't do that either, sadly.
Or if somebody takes money out of your account, right? You're insured against it.
With Visa, they're a huge company, global, right? If I travel quite a bit, and if I'm in a new country, they sometimes will say, "Well, wait, that's weird."
Oh, I get text messages.
Let's stop. Let's hold that. Phone us. Make sure that this is real. And I'm just one guy, and I'm not spending that much money, right?
Right.
But they get in touch with me and they check it. And if something like that happens, where somebody's actually used my numbers, they will reimburse me. They will investigate it and reimburse me, right?
Yeah.
And I'm covered that way.
So I was in DC a couple of years ago, came out of a bar, went to my Uber, blocked. Uber blocked. I was thinking, what is going on? It was because obviously it was going through to my account, my current account, to pay for the Uber. They noticed I was in a different country and they blocked it. And then 2 seconds later, I get a text message from a NatWest saying, "Dear Mr. Mystery, are you in this place, this place? Because we have blocked your card because we think somebody's using your card."
Yeah.
Now they've got the technology exists.
Yeah.
So, in terms of royalties, there should be some sort of insurance. There should be some.
I think, to be fair, I think the PROs and plenty of PROs are trying to do something. It is difficult because all these PROs that are working together, if you're looking at a credit card company, they're working for themselves. They're not working with all the other credit companies and having to merge that information. I'm just saying to kind of be upfront and kind of fair about what's going on. I do have my complaints, but we have to kind of realize that they deal with the cards that they've been dealt, but not to kind of let them completely off the hook, obviously. I think that for us as songwriters, I always think there are publishers that are trying to get rid of PROs, the bigger publishers that are kind of like, well, why can't we just do both performance and mechanicals and take care of everything? For songwriters, I think still, the PROs are our friend.
Yeah.
The PROs in general are non-profit. The PROs allow us to have songwriters and composers on the board, whereas we're not allowed to sit on the boards of the publishing companies.
Right.
So I think that what we need to do, which is another way of us kind of getting empowered, is to actually for people to run for the boards of the PROs get informed and actually go in and vote when there is something. I think a lot of the times, people, when you look at who gets elected, like most members of PRS don't even vote, don't get involved at all.
There is that, the creative person just wanted to create, and that's okay, that's another world, and I can't really get my head into that, and how am I going to figure that out, and and there is that element in quite a few sides of being a songwriter or being a composer, especially in the beginning stages, where they just go, okay, that sounds
I call it the infantilization of music creators, where we're all complicit in it. I think songwriters and composers a lot of the time don't take the responsibility they should. I think there are people in the industry that think this is really good.
They do. They get to an advantage because of that.
That think that the less that don't worry your little head, but it is our responsibility too. Because when I talk about splits and sitting down and discussing splits, I admit myself that I think it's the worst thing ever, and I rarely discuss splits. Well, now I do, but in the past, I kind of thought, it's like giving somebody a prenup on the first date. I want to, celebrate the great song that we wrote, not say like,
Of course, for you, in that example, in your example, as you grew into it and as you became perhaps a better known or well-known writer, you could go into it and say, actually, do you know what? It's a 50-50 split. Is that cool? But for youngsters going in, I totally get what you just said. It's like, how do I do that? But I would say to your listeners, and if they're composers, is that it's really cool. It's really cool for you before you write a song or whatever. And I know it's difficult because you don't know how much of something that somebody's going to write prior to writing it. But you should start off with 50-50 and then go, actually you did all the lyrics and most of the music. And negotiate.
Or maybe the next song you write together, you go, actually, let's think about this a little clearer. We'll keep it 50-50 on that first one, but the next one, let's...
Right. But the point I'm really trying to make is, okay, you should talk about it because it's really important. Stuff.
There is, if I could just interject, there is software right now. There's an app on your phone.
Well, Auddly does it.
Right, okay, Auddly, and there's one in the States as well.
There's loads of them, there's...
And you can just go and put in the song name, and if your co-writers are hip on the mechanics of the whole thing, they have their IP numbers, right? You can put that in. You can actually register the song right there and send it, and they forward it to your PRO.
Yeah, but again, I think that doesn't even address the problem of the way certainly that pop and hip hop and that kind of music and dance music is created today. I agree with you that if you're in the studio, 2 people 50-50, 3 people 33-33-33, and then even then people argue about the kind of
the
1.33,
3-4.
Yeah.
But so many times once you leave the studio, other people get added. And this is when the complications start.
Yeah.
And you might not be aware, and then suddenly, and this happens all the time, where you see the record and you're like, or even when it's about to get released, and you're like, who are these other people? I was just,
it's a producer, right?
There's the producer, the artist wants to change a word, get a third.
Right.
Some samples, though.
Yeah, samples.
They put samples in.
So all of that, when we look at, like, for example, when we were on the jury of the Ivors committee, we actually see the splits of records, because it's not open to the public, but because we kind of then judge if we're going to have, like, the songwriter of the year and whatever, we look at the splits of records, and you realize that so many of the records that are in the top 100 have splits that are completely uneven. Most of them are not 50-50 or split between 3. It's all these different, it's 6% really here and 12% there, and a lot of it is that the negotiations are not always about the value you brought to the project. It's about how big you are, how strong your manager is, and all of these things. So what you're saying with these apps where you can kind of like just put it in the API and send it through, there might be somebody amongst the 5 writers that I've kind of co-written something with, so one of them doing that, but that doesn't mean that that is correct, because I could be doing the same thing and then another one of the writers as well. So suddenly a song is 150% and not 100%.
That's a good point.
So again, it kind of goes back to that where you need to have a central point, which is the whole kind of Auddly ethos, where as long as everyone knows what happens, once you leave the studio, if somebody gets added and whatever, everyone is alerted every time that happens. It's just the complications of how records are done now. They had, I think it was year before last, they calculated that in the top 10 in the US, and this is also because of the rise of hip hop, the average amount of writers was 9.1.
Wow. That's the average.
What was the average?
Yeah, and besides that, how much do you get paid out of that, and are you going to get paid correctly?
I mean, of course, you've got samples and all sorts of other things, but in most of these cases, they're original songs, but they just had.
I feel very lonely with that number as a songwriter.
Well, just imagine if you had the 0.1, right?
Yeah.
I got ripped to shreds on Facebook once when I was at Ariana Grande track. And I was researching
7
something.
Rings or something.
Yeah, and I was researching something completely different, and I looked at the splits, and somebody got 1%, and I'm like, I'm glad somebody bought the triangle, because we were like, we were wondering who was going to play it.
Yeah.
And I got ripped to shreds on it because people was just saying they could have done something really important. And obviously, I was just making a joke because,
Well, I think for that particular song, what happened was, so it's based on my favorite things.
Yes, exactly.
So they.
I didn't know that.
So they took like the estate of those composers.
Yeah.
Took 90%. So suddenly it meant that all the people that had written.
All your 9 people.
Yeah, just had to split 10%. So.
And she got 2%, and I think something like that. It was kind of funny.
But you guys.
But I'm very happy for the original composers though.
Their estate. Well, they're not alive anymore, but.
Yeah. What do you think about the MCL in the States and this whole database thing?
Well, I think the jury's out. I think my biggest concern about it is how quickly they will revert to market share. So I believe it's something like a year and a half at the most. And if they can't find all the writers and have the right splits by then, it'll get distributed according to market share. And I've been told by somebody at a PRO that is dealing with data and who said that on average they got a clean registration about 18 months down the line. If you're looking at a Drake record or a Beyonce record, it could take even longer because of the amount of writers and negotiations. And I always look at incentives as well. Who benefits from market share? Who benefits from inaccuracies? So my concern is like how much effort is gonna be put on getting the right metadata. Secondly, it's very US focused.
Yeah.
And I believe that the biggest problems, the metadata problems they're gonna have is from songwriters and composers abroad that don't have a publisher in the US. For people like you, you're in Canada, you might not have a publisher in the US. No. So it's very, very likely that they're not going to have yet correct metadata for you. You've already told us.
Yeah.
So that money is then going to be distributed to other publishers. And to kind of, again, make a comparison of that, which I thought was really interesting, was back in the day when SoundCloud, this was only a few years back, but when SoundCloud went legit, I'm sure they'd argue that they were always legit, but when they finally were getting a proper license, there was a big chunk of money that was being paid to PPL, the performers organization and the record company organization in the UK. And the major labels said, well, let's split that money according to market share, because obviously we don't have the metadata of what music has been consumed on SoundCloud, so let's do it that way. And Alison Wenham, who was the head of AIM at the time, she said, no, let's have a look, let's face it, SoundCloud. What's most of the music on SoundCloud is independent music.
Yeah, it's not going to be majors at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And secondly, who would be more likely to not have their metadata properly organized? The independents.
Yeah.
Because the major labels have obviously bigger departments that deal with that. And it turned out in the end that actually when they drilled down to the usage on SoundCloud, that actually it was the complete opposite. So whereas the majors would have had, I think, 80 or 85% according to market share, the independents had 80 to 85%. And this is my argument about the MLC, that my fear is that the people who really will lose out are the smaller independents.
We mentioned it quite a lot today, that about there not being a union, there not being a central sort of like voice. We need to band together with the PROs, with the CMOs, with people like BASCA and AIM and all of the organisations, because the ultimate point I want to make is that, everything starts from a composer. I've spent my whole lifetime paying composers, whether I was at PRS or a publisher or do my royalty tracking stuff and etc. And I know the value of composers because all the stuff that is going on at the moment in terms of either tech companies or networks or Netflixes and whoever, most of the time they are not in the music industry, they are tech companies, and most of the time they are not looking at the value of the composer and the song. Talk to composers in that area, you'll hear from them time and time again. We get called in at the last minute, can you save the show?
Yeah.
Write some good music for it. Yeah. And they always come up with the goods.
It is kind of comparable to the food industry, where you have farmers. Farmers are like the composers. And if all the farmers couldn't afford to actually make food, we would all be in a lot of trouble. But there are systems in place to make sure that we sustain the farmers.
Right.
And Tesco's and all these food chains cannot, they try to get it as cheap as possible, right? Because the consumer wants it as cheap as possible.
Of course.
Right? You understand the mechanics of how that works. But there still is the understanding the farmer has to make a living. It's a serious thing. And so there's the governments and there's sustaining ways of looking after that.
Correct. But with tech has also helped in terms of YouTube and TV and different stations and arts, etc., where the message is gradually getting there in terms of composers and music. If you talk to anybody on the street and ask them, how important do you think music is to a TV show or a film or whatever?
Or a video game.
Video games, we just could not do it without music.
I will say though, with video games, that the composers I know who work in gaming actually do all right. Mm-hmm. That the gaming industry, it's a funny, interesting new way of making music, where they actually do, from the people that I've spoken to, that they do value it. And you don't have, even though obviously with that there is a buyout, but the way they pay it, because they realize how important the music is.
I got a very good friend of mine that does that, and he will make a whole heap of money from working on just one game, but it will take him 3 years. But that's great. He will get paid very well, and it will take 3 years out of his life to work on this particular game. But it's getting there to that stage.
It's interesting to we're getting to the wrap up part of this. Music is everywhere, in everything. I mean, when you really think about it, you walk down the street, everyone has a set of headphones, and I doubt that it's all podcast. I mean, and even when it's podcast, there's music there. There's music in television, there's music in film, there's music everywhere we go.
I went to lunch at a cafe, and the people in the cafe, everything's loud, but they do have music on. You can sort of hear it, but it's there, and I'm thinking, without that, it would be strange.
Supermarkets.
It would be strange to sit here if there wasn't that music playing. It would be a funny thing. You would miss it.
Yeah. of all art forms, of course I would say so because I am a musician, but I think of all art forms is the most all-encompassing, the most international, where you can listen to music, you might not even understand the lyrics, or it might not even have lyrics, it might just be music, and it'll move you to tears, and it doesn't...
Or lift you up, make you happy.
Or lift you, or make you happy. And, I think of all art forms, it is just the most international, the most kind of all-pervasive. And just because it's everywhere, we shouldn't think that it's just throwaway. It's the complete opposite. It's got such value. And when you've created something that moves people, I think that you deserve to get properly compensated. If you've reached that point where you can do that, and when you can do that more than once, when you can actually do that on a regular basis, I think, you certainly deserve as much as a CEO of a streaming company. That's what I think.
Yeah. Okay, nice place. Maybe we're going to end it there.
I tried to be a bit positive.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's call it a conversation. But thank you very much, both of you, for coming in and talking. This has been very, very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Excellent. That brings us to the end of our 2 episodes titled The Devaluation of Music with Jay Mistry and Helienne Lindvall. This episode was recorded at The Joint, the Central London rehearsal studios. For more information, please visit thejoint.org.uk. You'll be listening to the SyncLodge podcast series Exploring Music. My name is Lionel Lodge, and I thank you very much for joining us. Till next time.